It is time for another episode of the Cultural Hall, and it is an Articles of News episode where, let me tell you, if this goes the way that I think it's going to go, it's going to be a real long episode. Got a bunch of news, plus we had the Thanksgiving holiday that's now behind us, plus we have, a lot that we haven't covered in the last little bit. And because it's the Thanksgiving break, you're probably like, oh, everyone's off being with family. I find that sometimes that's an opportunity to be able to connect with people that otherwise wouldn't be able to join us here in the Cultural Hall. That is not the case with Megan the Mitch Mitchell. She is my favorite. With her schedule to say today, yes, this time, boom, which isn't to say that you're not highly in demand, but for whatever reason, our schedules align well. She's going to help out with
I
the
just
opening
figured that
exercises.
sorry, I'm talking over you. I just figured that I'm your favorite child.
Yeah, sure. You are my favorite sometimes, is what my
Uh,
mom always would say. You are my
yeah,
favorite sometimes. In the
yes.
second block, we're going to do some news. And again, I don't know because we're recording this as three separate things. The second block will likely be pretty light news. Different things like, the lights at Temple Square and some of these other things. And then if it happens the way that I think it's going to happen, the third block will be if you just wanted light news, go ahead and stop after the second block, because there are a few, heavier stories. Another case of abuse within the church, a little bit of an update on Tim Ballard. We'll talk about David Archuleta and where he's recently popped up. That's not necessarily as heavy as some of those others that I mentioned, but it will be very much that third block of the Cultural Hall, and it should be different co-hosts for each of them. So we'll see how that goes. I'm curious to see how this ends up, but that'll be coming up in the second and third block. I have you here in the first block because you can always send us an email, contact@theculturalhall.com. We love being able to chat with you, and there have been a few people that have reached out and have chatted. So let us start here. We read
Let's do it.
Travis's email a couple weeks ago. This was talking about the merit badge for white privilege. So, he said, hey, we keep talking about white privilege and you shamed her for being able to go on vacation, whatever. And I reached out after that and I said, hey, I want you to know, we read your email. I hope you felt like we addressed the concerns that you have. And you should know that contact at theculturalhall.com. Likely, if you email, we will share your email on the show. So you have to, in the first little bit, say, I would prefer to be anonymous, or somewhere certainly in the email. Otherwise, you will likely be shared. So Travis didn't do that. I think he was grateful that we were able to have the discussion. And the follow-up with Travis occurred as follows. He says, I did hear your reading of the feedback, and I felt like you glossed over it. And Megan seemed convinced that she has white privilege. It's like you completely missed the point that in an attempt to virtue signal your lack of racism, that you are being racist. I've met and been around plenty of very successful people of all races and skin colors, and the common thread between all is effort. Anybody of any color can make as much effort and outwork or underwork perform. Megan and her family should take as many trips as they can. As many trips as they can make work for them, and we should all support and encourage them. And she should never apologize for the work that it took to get there. Hold on. The same goes for all. You being the keeper of all feelings and love based on how often you virtual signal is off-putting. However, not so bad as to keep me from listening to your show. It may spark frustration to the point where I feel it necessary to waste both our times in these email exchanges, but I'm still listening. So I wrote back and I said, I feel like we're sort of saying the same thing. I feel, as I addressed, that it was a misnomer to call it white privilege. It isn't white privilege. But it still is a privilege to be able to go on vacation, a privilege that can and has been earned, but still a privilege nonetheless. It's not a right for people to be able to go on vacation. Many don't get to do that, and it's because they don't or haven't earned that privilege. To which Travis said, maybe we are saying some of the same things in different ways. I'm a listener and at times wish the show wasn't in such a virtue signaling echo chamber. Like church and other places where our lives intersect, we have different opinions and see things differently. I was put off enough this time to offer feedback. Love you, brother Travis. To which I say, thank you for being willing, to email, first of all, for caring deeply about it, and for calling us out about it. I would be curious to know, do you feel like there's anything additionally that, as we were sort of talking in and around you, that you're like, we need to make sure that this is said?
Yes. First of all, Travis makes some very good points that I definitely agree with. When I look back on the conversation that you and I initially had that sparked this whole interchange, never once did you say white privilege. And I think that that's very important to point out.
I think I did. I think in our initial conversation, I did not.
Okay. No, you said you realize that you're coming from a place of privilege.
Okay.
And so I do think that that's very important, because I do take I take things like racism very seriously, and I do take any sort of discrimination very seriously. And I feel like that does not fit the conversation. Now, it is important to point out, like you said, that there's privilege that can be very negative, that, oh, well, they're so privileged that they get all of this, da, 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 da. But in our follow-up conversation to that, it was more, let's celebrate people for having some good things happen to them and for having success. And it doesn't mean anything less. It's just a very interesting conversation to see play out, because I don't feel like white privilege just doesn't fit into this particular conversation. And I'm kind of talking around and mincing, I don't know, maybe I'm not being very eloquent, but I do want Travis to know that I was not personally bothered or offended by anything that went on in our conversation that apparently rubbed him the wrong way. And that's fine, because opinions matter and everybody's entitled to what they experience and how they feel. But I do think it's important to point out, white privilege is not the topic of conversation as I see it. Does that make sense? And like I said, I'm kind of talking around and not being eloquent, but.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the things that, I've thought more and more about this recently, because we sort of talk about, and this is related and completely unrelated. So here we go, sure. Tangential. But the idea of the American dream, right? Where everyone, the American dream is to be able to own your own home one day.
Right.
And how, I think they said 3 out of every 4 Utahns can't afford the median home in the state of Utah. Can't afford it. Are not able to, based on the wages of which they are paid, are not able to afford said home. Median home price. That means average. That means middle of the road home price in the state of Utah. And I think that sometimes we get a little bit skewed when we say things, well, it's the American dream, almost as though it's your right to own a home. And I think words matter so much in this case as well, because yes, can you bust your hump and be able to afford a home? Yes. Do some people have greater advantage to be able to do that? Yes. But do you deserve a house? 0%. Is it a privilege that you're able to have a house? Yes, 100%. And I think that some of our discussion too was just sort of tonality. Like, I was in this place and now I'm in this place. I think that speaks more about people that would take issue with, oh, must be nice to be her. I think that speaks more about the person that sort of has an issue with that. But I also think it is important, knowing the character that you have, you would never want to, as I know you'd never want to come across as flaunty. You'd be like, man, I was so grateful I got to be with my husband, got to be with my family.
Yeah.
We didn't always get to do that. So I think that there are several things worth mentioning within that particular thing. And that were the only thing that someone was talking to you about, Megan the Mitchell. We go to another email.
Let's do it.
This one From, let's just say it's J. Harmon. J. Harmon Witnessary is. Okay, so here we go. This
Okay.
sent to contact@theculturalhall.com. Elder Ballard's name being dragged through the mud? Question mark. And he might as well have added, assuming that it's a he, might as well have added an exclamation point. You both expressed
Absolutely.
that essentially maybe the bad news about Elder Ballard, the man and not the calling, can be laid to rest. And Megan said, Elder Ballard's name being dragged through the mud. Folks, come on. You can see the connections, and you can, at the very least, see the associations and pictures of Ballards together with several of the high net worth individuals that Elder Ballard was influencing towards the efforts of Tim Ballard and OUR. It could be seriously shown, it could seriously be shown and at least argued that Elder Ballard created the mud and was the mud many times at events, in conversations, in influence. It's not supposed, it is in evidences being played out. And goes on. You are complicit. You aid these things to happen with your blind obedience and saying such praising and blinded things about a person like Elder Ballard that has also been complicit. This complicity is, capitalized, is how the bad Mormon news can actually be told. It's people that can't even see the news for what it is, as they deliver it with rose-colored glasses. Spectacles, if you like. Come on! Disappointed listening today. Y'all make the bad happen by complicity in so many ways. You contribute to the fantasy of the chosen and inspired, and then it begins anew, the next bad news moment for your tribe. What say you, Megan the Mitch?
I say a lot.
Okay.
So maybe not. I don't know. But this, I feel like maybe this person writing maybe has some misplaced frustration and anger and disgruntledness to start with. I also say that, sorry, I'm trying to get all of my words together.
Okay.
I firmly believe that apostles and prophets are men who have been called of God. They are imperfect, and that is how it has always been. I was actually thinking about this when I was driving home from running some errands today, that we would very much like to hold all of the Latter-day prophets and apostles to a very specific standard. I don't think that that's necessarily wrong, but there is plenty of evidence in the Bible, in the Book of Mormon, of prophets who were less than perfect. You know, I mean, Moses had moments that he probably regretted, you know, and Lehi murmured against God. Like, you have mortal men who do things that are wrong. Okay. Maybe it's most likely unintentional. I mean, I would say overwhelmingly unintentional.
Would certainly hope to. Hopefully unintentional, right?
Exactly. And I do believe that here on the Cultural Hall, we don't shy away from criticisms. We really don't. But it's also criticism that is placed like in the right direction. I mean, I don't have a problem with Elder Ballard having an association with Tim Ballard before he knew that there was anything nefarious going on. You know, I don't take issue with that. And I mean, like I said, you and I were kind of corresponding offline about that, or off the air about this, when the email first came, and I'm like, I have pictures of myself with Tim Ballard. I made donations to Operation Underground Railroad. I told people that they should affiliate with the organization, that they should donate, that they should, you know, take up the cause. And it's because I didn't know that there was anything icky going on. Had I known, I would not have placed my affiliation in that direction. And I really believe the same for Elder Ballard. The fact that he's an apostle, I feel like, is only relevant to the story in as much as he is an apostle for the church that Tim Ballard belongs to. You know, I don't believe that the spirit of discernment should have been the thing that told Elder Ballard to not affiliate. You know, I just don't, that's just not how I understand it all to work. And I feel like I said, I feel like maybe this listener has some misplaced anger and frustration, because I don't know how we are considered complicit in bad things, you know, people making bad decisions.
Right.
That's not, but you know, I don't know. It's just all very confusing to me, the issue that this person has.
So I went back through the email, and this is how I'd just like to address it. I'll address it pretty quick. Okay. So Elder Ballard's name being dragged through the mud. Okay. I mean, I get that. I some validity, maybe, right? I mean, he certainly did some of the things. I'll address some of those in a minute. So, you know, was it drug through the mud? Maybe it was. And did he maybe deserve some of that? I would actually be willing to go as far as to say a little bit.
Sure.
But here is the leniency that I would allow that, because we do know that Elder Ballard did in fact introduce Tim Ballard to some wealthy people. Russ Brunson, previous guest of the Culture Hall, good friend of mine, and others, right? So we know that he did that. To your point, it is a leap and not proven at this point that Elder Ballard knew what Tim Ballard was doing and said, "Hey, I know he's doing this. I would like to introduce you to, you know, my these wealthy acquaintances that I have." As others have pointed out, and this is something I actually don't know how I feel about it. Should apostles be power brokers, introducers of prominent people to other people? I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, in the business world, if you were Ryan Smith, owner of the Utah Jazz, member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if someone came to him and said, "Hey, do you know a woman that is in charge of an organization that used to own the Jazz that would be interested in helping out this cause that we know Gail Miller is involved with? Could you introduce me?" If Ryan felt that person worthy of an introduction, that's how business works. Apostles are not businessmen. And that's where I start to go, I don't know that I love the idea of like, hey, because for whatever it is or whatever it actually isn't, there is a thing when, if you are involved with a particular organization, you back an organization, you are an organization, you are a thought processes, you are a content creator, whatever, when you are visibly seen with a hierarchical member of the church, whether or not that person supports your cause, believes your cause, knows even what your cause is, people can make the claim the church endorses because so-and-so was with so-and-so. And so that for me is at least where I kind of go, yeah, maybe I don't like this so much.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I would prefer that is not the case, that something like that would occur. But I don't think, to your point, you know, everything certainly public facing that I know about Elder Ballard's character, and certainly with the condemnation that he put forth from the church along with others, I can't imagine that he was like, well, you know, listen, I know you're trying to get women to sleep with you, so let me introduce you to my friend Russ Brunson.
Exactly.
Like, that's such a stretch. And I think that some people have made that sort of leap, like, oh, he totally knew. Of course, how couldn't he not have known? Of course. But I don't know how I feel about the introductions, and solely because I feel like, you know, and the case can always be made that like those introductions can be made for good. You know, if OUR was doing what they said they were doing, of course Elder Ballard would have been on board with that. We wouldn't be having this conversation if there hadn't been anything, you know, wrong going on within that. And so, are those introductions beneficial? Yes. I don't know that I love it, but but that part of that whole thing, the me being complicit is where I think this guy's just grabbing for stuff. It's like, listen,
Yeah.
I didn't ever donate to OUR. Uh, I I feel like we have been very fair about the story and in recognizing
Yes.
what we know and what we don't know. And so for us to say, you know what, I bet this was hard on Elder Ballard in the last few months of his life to have to go through something like that. And we phrased it as dragged through the mud. Okay, we could have used better words, different words, but that by no means is like, I'm complicit in this. I'm
Exactly.
sorry. I'm sorry for the anger that you have towards that particular thing. And I think that you have a right to be. Maybe you know something I don't know. Maybe just the power broking introduction is something that you find icky and you find that more icky than me. That's fine. But I reject completely out of hand the idea that I am complicit and the reason why this continues to happen and that somehow this is in any way my fault, especially since all throughout the story with you and with other people, we have said, what? Why?
Right.
What? No.
What are we talking about? Why
Yeah,
is this
why?
a thing?
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
the fact that that had occurred that we anyway,
Yeah.
there is no the church is not 100% right on this.
Mhm.
There's not, I think that there were mistakes that were made. I think that that's why the church
Sure.
ultimately had to say, we are not this.
Yeah. Nothing.
We
Yeah.
disavow this because they had to clear the water as far as that goes. So
Right.
I appreciate it. J Harmony, Witnessary, whatever. So there's that. How about some
Can
fun?
I,
Please.
yeah, go ahead. Well, I was going to just make one tiny little point, to your point about power broking and introductions. Okay.
Mhm.
And this might be, people might say it's a stretch, and that's fine.
It's
Because
a
it might,
stretch, and
will.
that's
It's a
fine. Go
stretch.
ahead.
And it might be. But let's say somebody came to, I don't know, President Nelson and
Mhm.
said, I'm in need of a doctor.
Mhm.
You know people. Do you know somebody who's a really great doctor who could help me with this problem? And I think President Nelson would be like, no. But say he were to recommend somebody to a member of the church, and then that doctor maybe doesn't practice at their best at the time, and then something terrible happens.
Sure.
Would we then hold President Nelson accountable for that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense what I'm asking? I mean, like,
Sure.
I get what you're saying about the power brokering and the introductions, and like at the very, very least, there needs to be care taken with how those things are handled. But it's just interesting to me that some like, hey, Russ, I happen to know this guy who's working on this thing. You should connect. I don't know. It's just
the only thing that I say that we can't be naive about is that I would assume, I haven't asked him. I should ask him if he'd be willing to come on and talk a little bit about this. But I would assume that there is some sort of, and this is why members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints get themselves into such trouble with affinity fraud. I would assume that on some level, Russ probably was like, oh, friend of Ballard's? Sure, it's got to be all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is maybe the part that I don't like about it, right? Hey, do you know a good house cleaner is a little bit different than, I want you to very intentionally meet this friend, and we'll continue to find out more of what he knew and didn't know, and at what times they knew, and I think ultimately we'll find out a little bit more about like what was the straw that broke Elder Ballard's back that was like, we have got to disavow
We're done
about this.
Yeah.
So there's that. This a quick one. Ann Vance, she emails in and says, I'm looking for the name of the Facebook group that you mentioned in a recent episode about temples that rotates through the meeting houses throughout the world. I think I understood that correctly. Thanks so much if you can help me out. So this is the thing that Corey K. Ward, the Pharaoh himself, does. You can find it on Facebook. It is called Latter-day Saint Chapels Around the World Daily. And this is just a passion project that he does. I've decided I'm not going to call him a nerd anymore, even though I may feel that way. Now look what I've done. I've done the same thing.
He's just very passionate.
He's very passionate about it. I love that he does it. Shows a chapel from around the world. I think he does it Monday through Friday. You can find it. So Anne and anyone else, it is Latter-day Saint Chapels Around the World Daily. So there's that. Other
That's
things
awesome.
that we should do. We're going to get to the book club, and that will be the last thing, but I did want to share this. We have asked people multiple times, and people don't do it, to leave a review of the Cultural Hall, and Jolene did that. I'm assuming her name is Jolene because It's Jolene is what her handle is. She says, great show in podcast form. I always look forward to the new episodes. Articles of news are my favorite, but I enjoy all of them. I've been listening since the 80s. No, not the years, but episode 83 to be exact, which I looked up. That's when we had Major League Baseball player John Buck into the Cultural Hall. I think that was like Christmas Eve morning or something like that. He came to my house and sat at my kitchen table. But
Oh my
that's
gosh.
episode 83, if people want to go back and listen to. She then says, I went back and listened to them all, so I can say that I've been here from the beginning, a lifer. I enjoy and admire Richie's interviewing skills. I've learned a lot from the guests over the years and have never regretted a minute spent in the Cultural Hall. So shout out to Jolene and anyone else who would want to leave a review. We really appreciate that. John B. Wilson writes, is there a complete list somewhere of all the older episodes of the show? I've been listening since a few months before the pandemic and would like to check out some of the older stuff, but even on Patreon, it is a mess to figure out which ones I want to start with. John, I would say two things to you. One, let the spirit guide, but I would really tell you, just go back. Patreon makes it super easy to just start from the beginning. And some of the joy from the beginning is to look at how the church has changed in 12 years. I mean, we did an episode at one point where we talked about how people should be able to get married civilly and then same day go to the temple. And that's different. That's completely different now than how it was when we started this whole thing. So the novelty of going back and listening, that would be the easiest way. But John, if you would like to be called to make a list, I know we have something sort of like that. You can find all the episodes at theculturalhall.com, but there is not an online resource of like, this is episode 1, this is episode 2, this is episode 3, unless you just go back and then click through and go episode 1, 2, 3. So sorry, John, I know that's not helpful. Patreon is how you do it. Become a Patreon saint, patreon.com/theculturalhall. And then we get into the names thing, and you were the one that brought this up, weren't you?
Yes, I was. It was me. It's always me. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem.
It's you.
It's me.
This I thought was particularly interesting, and this sort of combines a couple of things. David writes, I'll get right to it. Would it be possible to put AON or articles of news in the name of the episodes for those particular episodes? While I try to listen to all episodes, I prioritize the articles of news episodes because I want to be in the know with the latest news. He says, if it matters, I use Downcast to download, manage, and play the episode. Thanks for all your great work over the years. And then he signs his name, David Dammits, which I just love, as we now sort of move into the conversation about names. I wonder two things: if it's pronounced Dammits, and how many members of the church had said, do you know Brother Dangits? I just wonder if he's ever had the young person who's like, Brother Dangits,
Brother Darnitz will now
Brother
speak
Darnit.
to us in sacrament meeting.
Yeah. I wonder if that's the thing that has occurred. So I will say,
or what was it like on his mission, Elder Dammits?
Yeah, it's Elder.
Maybe it's Demeets.
Elder Hells and Elder Dammits. Hells and Dammits. And it's that we say it Hells, and it's actually spelled Hales.
Hales.
Yeah. So all to say, as best as I can, David, I'm starting to put the number of the episode, and then if it's in articles of news, to do AON as the first letters to try and signify that. And then he goes on to say, here's my contribution besides my last name to the running joke about Utah names. Oh no, wait, this is maybe a different email. I think it is a different email. Yeah, I think it is. And so I'm
still topical.
I'm sorry to whomever, I don't have your name, as I sort of copied and pasted all this stuff. Says, here's my contribution to the running joke about Utah names. My husband started this medication. When I saw the name, I thought it could definitely fit in the Utah naming world. It's called Brenzavvy, Brenzavvy. And then goes on to say, thanks for your enjoyable and uplifting content. So Brenzavvy, I don't think there's one in my ward, but is there one?
There will be.
Yeah.
Somebody heard it on the cultural hall and go, she's 9 months pregnant, doesn't know what to name her kid yet.
Yeah.
Bren Savvy. I figured it out.
Brenzavi Mahanrai Christiansen. I have to be careful. Quick aside. People in my ward are listening to the cultural hall now, and I mentioned how I don't feel like I fit in necessarily. And so I had this conversation on Sunday where it's like, oh, and you don't feel like you fit in? And I'm like, no. Do you feel like I fit in? And I thought that was kind of a funny thing. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, I'm a part member family gentleman who's middle-aged. There's 3 of us, that alone, not the part member part, but just the middle-aged gentleman, not to mention the part member thing, not to mention the liberal thing, not to mention the artistic, that kind of thing. I was like,
and you're a ginger.
Yeah. What part of me thinks that I fit in this ward? So that was uncomfortable. I love him, and I appreciate that he would reach out to me. So he'll and undoubtedly hear this and be like, it wasn't that weird. I love that you reached out. I think it's great. I'm finding my footing here. I love it so very much.
Well, here's the thing. Elders Quorum President is on his computer going, ding, 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 ding. New minister assignments for Richie Stedman. He's getting our best.
Yep. Give him to me. So there's that. And then last thing about names. This is from Holly Frachet. I never get it right. Sorry, Holly. Holly and Justin are huge fans of the show. We appreciate them very much. Says, hey, I had some thoughts on episode 737. First, Hidden, a true crime podcast, is one I've been listening to for a few years now, mainly because of Chad and Lori Daybell. I started listening back when that was the only case they had, and it was fascinating. Also, Lauren, the original co-host of the Cultural Hall, I parenthetically put that in, she does not write that, is no longer a member, but she tries to be really respectful of the church. Mostly. Anyway, the coverage they've done of the Daybell case has been pretty extensive, and they've been interviewed by Dateline because of it. They were also briefly in the latest Netflix documentary, which mostly featured Colby Ryan. One of my coworkers is related to Chad, and we are kind of obsessed. We follow the case and go down all the rabbit holes. And in case you were wondering, we're voting for cameras in the courtroom for Chad's trial. We want to watch him go down. Now, about the weird spelling of names in Utah. If you recall from Valentine's Day when you paid me a visit, which I gave her a singing telegram dressed up as Cupid, that's what she's referencing. Her husband technically gave her the singing telegram. I just delivered said singing telegram. If you recall from Valentine's Day when you paid me a visit, I work at a school and I see all sorts of weirdness, both in spelling and in the names themselves. Here are some of my true and actual favorites. Riggin, Riggin. Bailey, Bayleigh. Raven, Rayvyn. Crush, Krush. Cruz, Kruz. Stana or Stana? I don't even know what that name is.
Stana.
Stana, Stana.
Yeah.
Avinda, Aviendha. Avienda. I don't know. Hope you're having a good day and that you're feeling better. You still sound a little sick. See ya, Holly. So that to the naming thing. And then Holly, I realize I didn't include this in the email. I apologize. To you, she sent another email that says, Richie, heck yes to a book group. I'd be happy to help facilitate whatever help you need. I'm part of a book group in my neighborhood, which has been a thing for about 9 years. Our group is so much fun, and we read really interesting books, ones that a lot of our members would never have picked on their own. We have a pretty good formula for picking books. Let me know if you want to know more. Also, great job with Garrett Dirkmott. He's my neighbor, and his wife sometimes comes to our book group. When Garrett teaches Sunday school, his lessons are amazing. The running joke in our ward is that it doesn't matter what Garrett teaches, his lessons always tie in to Joseph Smith somehow. When my brother left the church, he was throwing out all sorts of things as reasons for why he was leaving, some of which I'd never heard anyone say. I texted Garrett's wife and asked if they could come over and answer some questions. They came, and it was great. Garrett knew exactly what my brother had been talking about, was able to explain a lot of random stuff that my brother had said, and it was a huge help. Anyway, great interview, and yes, for a book group. So it seems resounding that your idea for the book club, the Cultural Hall Book Club, is going to go. Have you had any further thoughts
Yay.
about said?
I mainly am wondering, and maybe we can kind of open this up to the people listening, is what is going to be the best way to like get people on? You know, is it like, do we just allow anybody on to come onto the Zoom? We send out the link and then we have like 30 people. Do we keep it more like there's 4 or 5 and maybe there's like a drawing, like a contest or something? Or like, I would love to know people's thoughts on that, because I have participated in book clubs before, but certainly never virtually, you know, or like on a Zoom discussion or something like that. I also have thought that this would be a really amazing opportunity to maybe promote up and coming authors who maybe don't get as much of a showcase as people who are more established. And, you know, you have a couple of co-hosts and former guests who I think would be awesome to have them on. As we read their book, they can actually help drive the discussion or be a part of the discussion. So those are just kind of my thoughts. Maybe we need a whole other Facebook group for it, for people who want to participate. I don't know.
Yeah, could be. I don't know. contact@theculturalhall.com is where people can send their emails, their feedback, their input as far as that goes. I think probably we're probably, at least at the beginning, every other monthers as we look for like timing to do something like this.
My thoughts as well. Yeah.
I like the idea of being able to speak to the author. The questions that I have is, you know, do we want it to all be either like nonfiction? I guess that's not really the word I'm talking about, but like, are we reading like, you know, Annette writes, though very research and those things, fictionalized books, and is a member of the church? Are we talking about that kind of stuff? Or are we, you know, are we doing like Richard Bushman's Rough Stone Rolling? You know, is it that kind of stuff, or is it?
I think we do a selection personally, because there's books that would come up where I'd be like, ooh, I really want to read that. And that's really good motivation for me to get the book and read it or listen to it on Audible. And then there's other books where I'm like, nah, I'm not really into that, but there is a group of people who will be, you know? And so, and like, I think about, you know, there's books about Latter-day Saints that are not directed to Latter-day Saints, that are not written by Latter-day Saints, but are still very, you know, good. I think about the book by autobiography of Orrin Hatch. You know, that would be a really interesting read. It's not sold by Deseret Book, you know, that I know of, you know, but, you know, I think there's a lot of different directions, but also we can kind of say like, maybe we'll alternate. Maybe it's fiction 1 month, maybe it's nonfiction the next, maybe, and then we kind of flip-flop back and forth. So yeah, I would personally love to see a mix of the types of books that we select.
Contact@theculturalhall.com. Would love the feedback and input about that, about anything else that we talked about today, anything that you'd like to weigh in on. Know that, of course, we will be sharing those emails, unless you say, please don't share my email. This is private. Keep it to yourself. Don't tell everyone about what our correspondence is, etc. Devaney Brandon is who sent the email about the Bresnavi. So sorry about that. I didn't have the name before, and that just popped up. Devaney.
Okay.
I think.
How's that spelled?
That's what I was just noticing. Devoney. Devaney, I would presume, but Devoney, maybe. Devoney could be any of those. You know, it's a shame that I'm not bringing kids into this world, because I would straight up just like umlaut and emoticon, emoji. I would all that in the kid's legal name just to mess around.
And then call him Ben. Well, and
Steve.
Here's the thing. I mean, I'm one to talk. You know my oldest daughter's name.
Sure. That's more common. Siobhan, but it's spelled like I would
It's
read it and go,
spelled
I don't know.
bananas.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like it's just, but I do maintain it's a name that's from my culture that is spelled correctly according to that culture. So no guilt.
Yeah, so that's not the thing. That is not
I
what
know.
we're talking about. This is
No, I
a
know.
little letter from over here and something from over
Yes.
here, and I want them to be the only, Bryn Levinson in their class, so we'll spell it with an E like we're Swedish, and grandma's maiden name was Sven. So, like it's just a
Yeah.
grab bag of what? A grab bag of
Yes.
what? All
Exactly.
right. We've gone almost a full episode just in business of
Sorry
the
about
culture
that.
hall. It's good. A lot going on. We don't do this very often. Make those reviews, send those emails, contact@theculturehall.com. Back with more news in a second block, and even more news if I do this the way that I'd like to in a third block of the Cultural Hall.